The undercover CEO was watching. He was shocked by what this waitress did after hours. "You're fired, Elena. Security will escort you out," the manager said coldly, his voice echoing through the empty cafe. But what he didn't know was that the CEO was watching from the shadows disguised as a janitor, and what happened next would change everything. If you believe that true character is revealed when no one is watching, please like and subscribe to our channel for more incredible stories about workplace heroes and the power of doing what's right. Now let's uncover the shocking truth about what really happens behind closed doors at this cafe. Cameron Ellis adjusted the uncomfortable polyester uniform one more time, checking his reflection in the men's restroom mirror of the downtown Seattle Brew and Branch location. The $24.99 janitor's outfit felt foreign against his skin, a far cry from his usual $3,000 Italian suits. His manicured hands now bore fake calluses, and his perfectly styled hair was hidden beneath a worn baseball cap. "Remember, you're Cam Thompson," he whispered to himself. 45 years old, divorced, 2 kids, been cleaning offices for 15 years. Cameron Ellis, the 38-year-old CEO of a $2.8 billion coffee empire, had become Cam Thompson, an invisible member of the working class he employed, but rarely encountered. This elaborate deception hadn't been born from boredom. 3 months of quarterly reports painted a troubling picture of the downtown Seattle location staff turnover approaching 200% annually, customer complaints tripled, and franchise review scores plummeting from 4.8 to 2.1 stars in 6 months. "It's probably just growing pains," his COO had assured him. "These things work themselves out." But Cameron's instincts told him otherwise. The breaking point came with an anonymous email. "Mr. Ellis, you don't know me, but I work at your downtown Seattle store. Things are happening here that you need to know about. People are getting hurt and good employees are being driven away. If you really care about the values Brew and Branch claims to stand for, you need to see this place for yourself. Not as the CEO, but as someone who can see what really happens when the corporate visits aren't scheduled." So here he was about to begin Operation Ground Zero, a 2-week undercover investigation that would either confirm his suspicions or prove his executive team right. The employee break room was a stark contrast to the polished customer areas. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on mismatched furniture. The coffee machine was broken with a handwritten sign, "Out of order since March." "You must be the new janitor," a voice said behind him. Cameron turned to see a young woman in her mid-20s, her Brew and Branch apron stained with coffee. Her name tag read Noel, and despite the exhaustion in her dark eyes, she offered a genuine smile. "That's me," Cameron replied. "Cam Thompson." "Noel Chin," she said with a firm handshake. "Don't let the uniform fool you. I'm actually the closing barista tonight. We're short-staffed, so everyone wears multiple hats around here." "How long have you been working here?" Cameron asked. Noel's expression shifted. 3 years. Used to love this job, actually. The company values seem real, community, integrity, excellence. But things have changed. Before Cameron could ask what she meant, a loud voice boomed from the front. "Noel, where's my end-of-day report? And why are there still customers in here? We closed 5 minutes ago." The voice belonged to Brad Wilcox, store manager, whose entire demeanor radiated aggressive authority that Cameron recognized from toxic middle management. "Coming, Brad," Noel called back, her voice carefully neutral. She turned to Cameron apologetically. "That's our manager. He's particular about procedures." Cameron watched Noel hurry toward the front, her shoulders tensing with each step. In that moment, he realized his investigation had already begun, and the anonymous email sender might have been understating the problems. Cameron's first week revealed a workplace culture that bore no resemblance to the company he thought he'd built. Brad Wilcox operated like a different person, depending on his audience, professional and courteous, during the day when district managers might visit, but after 7 p.m., his true nature emerged. "Maria, you're 15 minutes over your scheduled hours," Brad announced to a young barista still cleaning the espresso machine. "Clock out now or I'll have to write you up for unauthorized overtime." "But I'm not finished with the closing checklist," Maria protested. "The morning shift will—" "Not my problem," Brad cut her off. "You should have managed your time better. Clock out." Cameron watched Maria's face crumple with frustration. He later learned that Brad routinely scheduled employees for shifts 30 minutes shorter than required to complete their tasks, forcing them to choose between leaving work undone or working unpaid overtime. The pattern became clear. Brad was manipulating schedules to keep employees just under the 30-hour threshold for benefits. Shifts were broken up with unpaid breaks, and employees were frequently sent home early, regardless of their financial needs. But the schedule manipulation was just the beginning. Cameron discovered Brad had implemented an elaborate system of favoritism, dividing staff into the chosen few, who received consistent hours and protection, and everyone else who lived in constant fear. Noel was firmly in the second category, despite being one of the most skilled employees. Cameron watched her work with genuine care, knowing regular customers' names and taking extra time to perfect each drink. Yet Brad treated her with barely concealed disdain. "Noel, this latte art is unnecessary," Brad snapped one evening. "We're not an artisan cafe. Speed of service is what matters." "But customer satisfaction scores," Noel began. "Are fine," Brad interrupted. "Focus on efficiency, not showing off." Cameron bit his tongue, remembering the customer feedback that specifically praised Noel's attention to detail. The most disturbing discovery came during Cameron's second week when he witnessed Brad's approach to inventory management. Late one evening, Cameron overheard Brad on a phone call. "Yeah, I can get you another case of the premium beans. Same price as before. Cash only, and you pick up from the back alley." Through a crack in the door, Cameron watched Brad set aside a case of brew and Branch's signature roast retail value $200, and later loaded into his personal car. Despite Brad's toxic management, the staff had formed a supportive community. Cameron watched Noel quietly slip a free sandwich to Marcus, whose hours had been cut so severely he was struggling to afford meals. He saw Maria stay late unpaid to help train a nervous new hire. These employees embodied the values Cameron had tried to instill: community, integrity, excellence, while their managers systematically undermined everything the company claimed to represent. The third week brought events that would expose the full extent of Brad's misconduct. It started when Cameron arrived to find the cafe atmosphere unusually tense. Elena Martinez, a soft-spoken barista and single mother, had been fired the previous Friday. Brad called it cash handling irregularities, Noel explained during a break, her voice tight with emotion. Claims Elena was skimming from the register. Cameron's blood ran cold. He'd observed Elena for 2 weeks and never seen anything suggesting dishonesty. She was meticulous about procedures, often double-checking counts and asking for verification. "What kind of irregularities?" Cameron asked. "That's just it," Noel said. "Brad won't give specifics. Just says there were discrepancies in her drawer totals. But Elena always balanced perfectly." During his lunch break, Cameron used his CEO access to review register reports for Elena's shifts. What he found confirmed his suspicions. Elena's register showed discrepancies, but they followed a pattern pointing to manipulation rather than theft. Small amounts were missing only on days when Elena worked alone with Brad, but on days with other witnesses, her counts were perfect. More damning, the missing cash amounts roughly matched the value of products Brad was stealing. He was skimming from Elena's register to cover missing inventory revenue. The situation escalated when Cameron overheard Brad on a phone call with what appeared to be a district manager. "I understand your concerns about turnover, but sometimes you have to make tough decisions to protect the integrity of the operation. Elena Martinez was a theft risk that we caught before it became a bigger problem." Cameron felt sick listening to Brad's lies, knowing he was destroying Elena's reputation and future employment prospects. That evening, Cameron witnessed something that would change his understanding of true leadership. He found Noel sitting alone, carefully counting a small stack of bills and coins. "Everything okay?" Cameron asked. Noel looked up, then seemed to decide to trust him. "Can I ask you something, Cam? If you knew someone was being treated unfairly, really unfairly, but speaking up might cost you your job, what would you do?" She showed him a photo of Elena with a young boy. "That's Elena's son, Miguel. He has autism and needs regular therapy sessions. Elena's insurance through this job was the only way she could afford his treatment." "She didn't steal anything," Noel continued. "I've been watching Brad, documenting everything. The inventory that goes missing, the way he manipulates schedules, how he treats different employees. Elena was getting too close to figuring out what he was doing." Cameron stared at this young woman who possessed more integrity than most executives in his corporate headquarters. "What are you planning to do?" he asked. Noel showed him the money she'd been counting tips from her shifts carefully saved. "Elena's rent is due Friday. I can't fix the whole situation, but I can make sure she and Miguel don't end up on the street while she looks for another job." Cameron was stunned. Here was an employee making barely above minimum wage, sacrificing her own financial security to help a colleague who had been wrongfully terminated. That night, Cameron made a decision. The investigation phase was over. It was time for action. The next evening, Cameron volunteered to help Noel with a deep cleaning project, creating an opportunity for natural conversation about Brad's management practices. "I've been here 3 weeks now," he said while moving storage shelves, "and I'm still trying to figure out how things work around here. Like, how come some people get consistent schedules and others have their hours cut randomly?" Noel glanced toward the door, then pulled out her phone. "You really want to know?" What Noel showed Cameron was extraordinary in its thoroughness. She had documented schedule manipulations keeping employees under benefit eligibility, inventory discrepancies coinciding with Brad's side business, sexual harassment toward female employees, wage theft through forced unpaid overtime, discriminatory treatment based on perceived vulnerability. "Look at this," Noel said, showing him a detailed spreadsheet. "Elena's register shortages started exactly 2 weeks after she complained to corporate about Brad's scheduling practices. Before that, she balanced perfectly for 18 months. She swiped to photos taken discreetly. And here's Brad loading inventory into his personal car. I've documented 12 instances over 2 months." Cameron was amazed by the quality of Noel's investigation, dates, times, amounts, and witness statements. It was more thorough than many professional investigations. "Why haven't you taken this to someone higher up?" Cameron asked. Her expression darkened. "Because I tried. 3 months ago, I called the corporate ethics hotline. They contacted the district manager who called Brad to investigate. Brad knew it was me within a week, and suddenly my hours got cut from 35 to 15. She showed him another file, audio recordings. "Washington is a one-party consent state. Everything here is legal." Cameron listened to Brad berating employees, making inappropriate comments, and explaining to another manager how to manipulate time clocks to avoid overtime. "The problem is," Noel continued, "I need someone with authority who will actually listen and act. The corporate systems are designed to protect the company, not the employees." "What about Elena?" Cameron asked. "I've shared some with her, but Elena's scared. She's got Miguel to think about, and she can't afford to get blacklisted. Brad has connections throughout the industry." Cameron made a decision. "Noel, what if I told you there might be a way to get this information to someone who could actually do something about it?" She looked skeptical. "Like who? Another corporate hotline that will tip off Brad? Someone higher up, someone who could bypass the local management structure entirely." Noel studied his face carefully. "Cam, what exactly did you do before you became a janitor?" Cameron felt panic. "I worked in an office environment, saw how these things can work when the right people get involved." Noel seemed to sense there was more to the story, but recognized Cameron was genuinely trying to help. "If you really think you can get this to someone who matters," she said slowly, "I'll share everything, but Elena needs to be protected. She can't afford more retaliation." "I promise you," Cameron said, meaning it completely, "Elena will be protected, and so will you." What Cameron didn't tell Noel was that within 48 hours, her documentation would be on the desk of the CEO of Brew and Branch because he was going to put it there himself. Friday arrived with Cameron feeling the weight of what he was about to do. He had spent Thursday night reviewing Noel's documentation and cross-referencing it with corporate records. The evidence was overwhelming. He had also arranged for Elena to be present that evening for a follow-up interview regarding her termination and positioned his legal team, HR director, and security outside the store. At 6 p.m., Elena arrived looking nervous. Brad greeted her with false sympathy, playing the concerned manager dealing with a difficult situation. At exactly 7 p.m., Cameron received his signal that the corporate team was in position. He set down his mop and walked deliberately toward the office where Brad was meeting with Elena. "Elena, I want to help you," he could hear Brad saying, "but the evidence is pretty clear. If you're willing to admit to the mistakes and agree not to pursue legal action, we might be able to work out a reference that doesn't mention the theft allegations." Cameron knocked and entered without permission. Both Brad and Elena looked up in surprise. "Cam, what are you doing?" Brad snapped. "This is a private meeting." "Actually, Brad," Cameron said, removing his cap and fake glasses, "I think it's time we had a conversation about what's really been happening here." Brad's face went through confusion, recognition, then pure terror as he realized who was standing in front of him. "Mr. Ellis," Elena gasped, recognizing the CEO. "Hello, Elena," Cameron said gently. "I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, but you're not in trouble. You're the victim of a serious crime." Brad had gone pale. "Mr. Ellis, this isn't, I can explain." "Actually, Brad, I'll do the explaining," Cameron said authoritatively. "For the past 3 weeks, I've been working in this store as a janitor observing your management practices." Cameron pulled out his phone and began reading from Noel's documentation. Schedule manipulation to avoid benefits, inventory theft, wage theft, sexual harassment, and finally embezzlement and framing an innocent employee to cover your tracks. "Elena," Cameron said, turning to her, "you have never stolen a penny from this company. Brad has been removing cash from your register to cover revenue from inventory he's been stealing and selling privately." Elena's eyes filled with tears of relief. "I knew I hadn't done anything wrong." "The reports were falsified," Cameron confirmed. Noel appeared in the doorway, having heard the commotion. Her eyes widened as she took in the scene. "Noel," Cameron said, "I believe you have something that belongs to this investigation." Understanding immediately, Noel handed over her phone. "Everything's documented." Brad made one last desperate attempt. "You can't prove any of this." Cameron played one of Noel's audio recordings of Brad detailing his theft scheme. Brad's own voice filled the office. "Brad Wilcox." Cameron said formally, "You are terminated immediately for theft, embezzlement, fraud, and harassment. Security is waiting outside and police have been notified." Corporate security entered and escorted Brad from the building in handcuffs. "Elena," Cameron said, "on behalf of Bruin Branch, I formally apologize. You are being offered immediate reinstatement with full back pay, benefits, restoration, and a promotion to shift supervisor." Elena was crying with relief and gratitude. Cameron then addressed Noel. "What you've done here is extraordinary. Your documentation and courage have exposed a criminal enterprise. I'd like to offer you a position in our corporate ethics department, leading a new employee advocacy program." Noel looked stunned. "You're really the CEO?" Cameron smiled. "I really am, and you're really a hero." As the evening progressed, Cameron met with each employee individually, hearing their stories. By the end of the night, he had not only cleaned house, but gained invaluable insights into how his company's policies needed to change. Most importantly, he had discovered that the values he had tried to instill in Brew and Branch were alive and well in employees like Noel Chin, who embodied them even when the system failed to support them. In the months following Brad's arrest, the downtown Seattle Brew and Branch underwent a transformation that rippled throughout the corporate structure. Cameron used this crisis to fundamentally reform company operations, starting with policies that had allowed Brad's misconduct to flourish. Elena returned not as a frightened, demoralized employee, but as a confident shift supervisor with full corporate support. Her colleagues welcomed her with applause, and customers who had heard about her situation offered support. "I never thought I'd feel safe at work again," Elena told Cameron during one of his regular visits. "But knowing the company actually listened and acted, it changes everything." Elena's promotion came with a significant raise in benefits, ensuring Miguel could continue therapy. She was given authority to implement new scheduling practices that prioritized employee welfare alongside efficiency. Noel's transition to corporate ethics was remarkable. Her employee advocacy program focused on creating systems where problems couldn't take root in the first place. "We're not looking for perfect stores," Noel told audit teams. "We're looking for honest stores where employees feel safe, valued, and heard." The program identified 3 other locations with similar management issues, addressing them through retraining or management replacement. Cameron also implemented a direct reporting system bypassing local management, with every report investigated within 48 hours. The financial impact was significant but positive. While labor costs initially increased due to better practices, employee turnover dropped dramatically. The downtown location went from 200% annual turnover to one of the lowest rates in the chain. Customer satisfaction scores improved dramatically, going from 2.1 to 4.7 stars in 3 months. With stable staffing and valued employees, service quality increased substantially. It turns out that treating employees well is actually good business, Cameron remarked to his board. The transformation extended beyond policy to cultural shifts. Cameron visited the downtown location weekly not undercover, but as a CEO maintaining connection with frontline operations. During one visit, he observed a new employee accidentally spill expensive coffee beans. Instead of public humiliation, Elena calmly helped clean up, while reassuring the employee that mistakes were part of learning. Noel used it as a teaching moment about proper procedures. That's what a healthy workplace looks like, Cameron thought. The employee advocacy program received over 200 reports in 6 months, not because problems increased, but because employees felt safe speaking up. Most issues were resolved through mediation, with only a handful requiring discipline. The success attracted national attention from business publications and employee advocacy groups. Cameron spoke at conferences about authentic corporate values and the business case for treating employees with dignity. The most expensive mistake we made, Cameron would tell audiences, was assuming our policies were actually protecting employees. It took going undercover to realize that policies without accountability are just words on paper. The most meaningful validation came from employees themselves. On the 6-month anniversary, the downtown staff presented Cameron with a framed team photo and note, "Thank you for seeing us as people, not just labor costs." 2 years later, the transformation of Bruin Branch had become a business school case study. For Cameron, the true measure wasn't academic recognition. It was visible daily in employees who came to work feeling valued and heard. The downtown location had become the flagship Cameron always envisioned, not for its location, but because it embodied company values in action, serving as a training ground and model for ethical business practices. Elena had thrived as shift supervisor, implementing scheduling practices adopted company-wide. Her approach balanced operational needs with employee welfare so effectively that Bruin Branch was recognized for progressive labor practices. Noel had become one of the youngest VPs in company history, leading a 12-person team working across 847 locations. Her program had been replicated by dozens of companies. The secret isn't complicated, Noel would tell audiences. Listen to your employees, believe them when they tell you about problems, and act swiftly to address issues. Brad had been sentenced to 3 years in prison, with his case becoming a cautionary tale about unchecked authority and inadequate oversight. Cameron's leadership perspective was fundamentally altered. He now spent one day monthly working alongside frontline employees at different locations, not in disguise, but as a CEO wanting to understand real challenges. I learned more about my company in 3 weeks as a janitor than in 15 years as CEO, Cameron reflected. The view from the top is important, but incomplete. These visits had generated dozens of operational improvements, from employee suggestions from inventory systems to breakroom amenities. The financial impact exceeded projections. Employee turnover dropped from 156% to 43% annually. Customer satisfaction increased 23% system-wide, and same-store sales growth outpaced competitors for 8 consecutive quarters. The company's Glassdoor rating improved from 2.8 to 4, 6 stars, with employees citing supportive management and advancement opportunities. On the 2-year anniversary, Cameron returned to the downtown location for a celebration. Looking around the bustling cafe, employees collaborating, customers enjoying exceptional service, positive energy everywhere. He was reminded why he started the company. 2 years ago, I thought leadership meant setting strategy and driving results, he told the assembled staff. I was wrong. Leadership is creating conditions where good people can do their best work, and everyone feels valued for who they are, not just what they produce. He looked at Noel and Elena, whose courage had catalyzed the transformation. You taught me that the most important business metric isn't profit margin. It's how many people go home from work feeling better about themselves than when they arrived. That's the real measure of success. For some, the transformation proved businesses could be both profitable and principled, that employee welfare and financial performance were complementary goals, and that sometimes the most important thing a leader can do is admit they don't have all the answers. The story had become more than a business case. It was a reminder that in a world where people often feel invisible, The simple act of truly seeing and valuing others can transform individual lives, entire organizations, and communities. Disclaimer: this content is entirely fictional and created for entertainment purposes only. The story, all names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. No identification with actual persons living or deceased places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred. No person or entity associated with this content has received any payment or anything of value or entered into any agreement in connection with the depiction of tobacco products. This video is not intended to defame, insult, or convey false information about any individual.